Hi everyone, my name is Alistair Lawrence. I'm the Special Projects Editor at Times Higher Education, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Nicholas Chu, founder and CEO of Sinorbis, and Gitte Buntes-Foldager, Communications and Marketing Coordinator at Aarhus University in Denmark. So thank you both for joining us for International European Higher Education in the Digital Age. And I'd like to dive straight in by asking how Europe can increase the diversity of its student cohort at a time when international students and their path through higher education has potential to change massively in the coming years. Nicholas, can we come to you first?
Yes, I think the biggest change has been how the whole recruitment process has shifted online, and what I don't think that recruiting agents and offline study events will ever be replaced fully by online activities. I think that what happened with the whole pandemic, especially to attract international students through digital means, will stay and will be there for quite some time. So in addition to the channels, some of the influencing decision-making factors of international students have shifted as well during this period, and I think institutions will have to take all this into account in order to be seen as attractive for international students.
Great, thank you. Gitte, is Aarhus looking at becoming more international and more diverse in terms of the students it attracts now?
We certainly are. We are definitely looking mostly actually on non-EU markets and trying to recruit more from outside of Europe for some political reasons also, but also to diverse our student body as well, because for European students, they can study for free. So of course, it's a lot harder to recruit students from outside of Europe who has to pay either to pay tuition fee or to get a scholarship. And that's certainly something we're looking into. So we are expanding our activities both in China and in India, and also in Bangladesh and Turkey, and also somewhat in the US and Mexico.
Okay, great, thank you. Nicholas, you obviously specialise in Chinese student recruitment. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that you go through at Sinorbis to support universities?
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, we're trying really to explain to our clients the type of mistakes that you should be making when you try to go after the Chinese market. Because unlike what you have in the UK, in France, in Germany, and the rest of Europe, your digital presence in China is not going to work unless you build something dedicated for this market. The first mistake that we always see is usually they don't have a dedicated website in Chinese and optimized for this market. This sounds pretty obvious because when you have a website in the UK, it will work everywhere else in the world except in China. So when you go after this market, you need to have your foundations right. You need to have your websites in Chinese that works in China. That's the first mistake that we always see. The second one is that we sometimes see that some people are using someone else's license to be visible in China. It does happen a lot because it is very, very difficult to go after this market. We see a lot of institutions leveraging the licenses of agencies on the ground. This, we believe, is also a mistake that we try to explain to our clients, because the problem is that the license sits with the agencies and not you. It means that if you stop working with the agencies, then obviously you don't own the assets. The third one is not to understand that the channels that you are leveraging or that you have been leveraging to promote your institutions, your brands for years don't exist in China, and you need to reinvent them. You need to go after, the channels that are used in China, such as WeChat, for instance, where you need to have your own WeChat official account. That would be the equivalent of a Facebook page, but on steroids, as an example.
That sounds, Facebook on steroids certainly sounds like something. But so Gitte, how long has this process taken to refine at your institution? Was there an element of trial and error in terms of how you started to approach Chinese students?
Well, definitely. I think we went on WeChat in 2016, but there's definitely some trial and error, especially to finding the right agency. As Nicholas says, it's been a process because it's just so hard because everything is so different from what we're used to in other markets, and not knowing the Chinese language as well also is a barrier. So we definitely have some old WeChat accounts lying in there and now we have a new one, and we actually had a Chinese website when we joined with Sinorbis, but we found out that the loading time was really bad, and that was actually one of the reasons why we wanted to have a Chinese website in the first place. But then we found out that it wasn't really that good. So now we have a new one where it loads a lot faster, and I think that's part of the reason to have a Chinese website. Of course, just of course to be in the market in Chinese, but also to be beyond the firewall, as they talk about.
Okay, great, thank you. Nicholas, to that point, what opportunities are being created now with the mass shift to online and over the past 14 months or so for European universities to engage better with, not just China, but also various other foreign markets that are hard to reach?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think well, when you look at the Chinese student acquisition journey, this one has always included some touch points online, digital touch points. When usually a student is looking to study overseas, they will be talking to an agent. They will probably be attending some webinars now. Before it used to be face-to-face events. But they will definitely be going online. They will be Baidu-ing your institutions. They will be looking at different criteria. They will be asking their friends on WeChat. They will be checking information on online portals. So this has always been the case. What we have seen over the last 15 years with the pandemic is that institutions really completely embraced that much more than before, which I think is really good for China, because now it allows institutions to be across all those different touch points throughout the journey, not only to be present, when there's a fair, for instance, even if this one is virtual now, but also to have their own assets. So to have a website, as Gita mentioned, that works in China. It's not obvious always. To have a WeChat account that they can leverage to engage and nurture the relationship throughout the process, but also to be able to look at the analytics and to measure the performance of their activities. This is something I think that we noticed over the last 15 months. That is really different.
Great, thank you. Get to the points Nicholas making about engaging with students at different points in their at the point where they're looking for another university or looking to learn more about different countries. Are your student fairs looking different now? Or so the initial stages of contact where you first tell students who you are, what you do, and why you're an attractive destination, has that communication changed over recently?
Well, definitely, but of course we use a lot of different recruitment channels. So our position in student web portals is of course the same, but all our fairs in the fall, of course, was changed from offline physical fairs to digital fairs in different levels of success. I think the traditional fair where you go around and talk to different universities we found out that wasn't really working online. So it was more, we needed to be more connected to a few students at a time. So it's more one-to-one basis in an arranged setup instead of this where you sometimes just come across a university you haven't heard of. That doesn't really happen in the same way online. We found, so we had to figure out new ways to be the university they stumble upon, if you can say that. So we're trying different ways online to do that, both in China and also other markets. So, for instance, we are trying out to be present on Shihu in China, which is like Quora. So when people ask about studying in Europe, our university is one of the ones that comes up with answers. So we're trying other approaches as well. And then we have, and that's something that we can do because we have some very good Chinese student assistants who can also suggest to us, well, what would be the natural step if we wanted to find more students like themselves in China. And we have a large student network of current students from a lot of our focus markets that also engage with us and help us with the peer-to-peer communication and help us with networking and getting out there. And I think that's really important as well.
I did want to ask about that actually. How important is it now to build that network of student representatives, and so students can find out through asking their peers as well as asking the university about what they can expect?
Well, I think it's vital, and actually in many processes of the recruitment funnel. So we can see right now that many of our current students are replying to queries for students who's actually coming this fall. So they already been recruited, but then they are asking about, maybe they've received offers from 2 or 3 universities, and then they are figuring out which universities to choose. So they are asking, well, what are these courses about? What are the accommodations like, and they want these answers from current students instead of us, because I think they feel it's more honest and more real. So we are both using them like late in the process, but also to gain knowledge about the markets in the early process.
And in terms of onboarding students when they come to a physical location, is it important that they're fully aware of what their accommodation situation is going to be? And are you grouping students from certain countries together so they can get acclimatized more quickly, or is it a mix of students in different places? I mean, how much is the accommodation strategy woven into the overall attracting students to the university?
Well, I think Denmark is very different from the UK. So something like accommodation is for some students it's organized by university, but for the majority of international students, it's something that they figure out themselves.
Okay.
But it's not a problem because there's a lot of student residence in our town. It's not organized by the university, but it's available to all students studying at all the higher education institutions in Aarhus. So it's something that they figure out themselves. So we don't try to group them, but we do a lot in the introduction week to make them settle and find the groups that they want to participate in. But then we also have WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, and also a WeChat groups for all our Chinese students coming, where we have, I think, 5 or 10 of our current Chinese students engaging with the students coming this fall and answering questions about where it would be nice to live, what are the daily life, or transportation problems, things like that.
Okay, great, thank you. Nicholas, does this reflect the general trends that you're seeing where students are having all sorts of questions about coming to a new country and a new university in Europe that can be answered through these channels, as well as their questions about their academic courses?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm always often asked by institutions which social influencers, who they should be using as social influencers to promote the institutions, towards Chinese students. And we always answer the same thing. Your current and past students, your alumni, will be the best ones to provide this, not only to promote your brand, but also to share information about, different elements that are usually seek for by students. I mentioned earlier that more and more students are looking online to get information, not only about the ranking, about the academics, but also about the living, about the safety, especially for Chinese students. This is really, really important. And they heavily rely on what their peers are saying, whatever it is through peer groups, whatever it is through WeChat groups, also just by looking at what their friends are posting on WeChat, because on WeChat, similar to Facebook, you have a wall where your friends are posting all the time, and they can see what people are posting about their experience studying in Denmark, for instance, and then they can relate, and then they can ask directly questions to them.
And what are the biggest cultural barriers that students need help with when they're coming, particularly from China to Europe, do you think?
Oh, it's a very, very good question. I wouldn't say the language. From China, if we look at what students are looking for when they decide to study overseas, I wouldn't say there's a cultural differences, but definitely going back to what I was saying, safety remains paramount. And that's where I think a lot of institutions in Europe can really play a good role compared to, unfortunately, some in the US, where you do hear issues about guns and things like that, at least from a Chinese perspective, even if it's not always true. Now, in terms of cultural differences, I wouldn't say that they would be major obstacle, but unless it is more the way how they consume information and how they behave, because the digital space in China is completely different. The way how usually students in China would be consuming information or interacting during his or her day-to-day would be completely different than in Europe. In China, you can do almost everything through WeChat. You can pay for your transportation. You can even file for a divorce now on WeChat. You don't have the equivalents, in Europe. So probably it's not a cultural obstacle, but it's definitely a time to adapt that not everything is the same. Everything is very mobile. You can pay everything through mobile. In China, you can even pay with your face now. It's quite often. So the technology differences, especially compared to tier 1 cities, would be one of them. But I wouldn't say that it's an obstacle per se. It's just a time for the students to adapt. That's it.
Great, thanks, Nicholas. Yeah, I don't think universities are required to provide divorce proceedings yet, so hopefully that will get to that point. Nicholas talked about Chinese students having a very different experience online. Once they are in situ at your university, do you see them migrating across to traditional social media channels and getting their communications from the universities that way, or do they tend to stay on the bespoke groups that you've created for Chinese students?
Well, I think I think like we would probably still be on Facebook if we were in a different market, even though that was a different social media. That was the main social media in that market, and that's the same. We see that they stay on WeChat and they talk in their groups on WeChat. Some of them also join Facebook to talk to students from other countries, but we can still see that our WeChat groups are very active also while in the years that they are here.
Okay. Right. I also wanted to ask about the data that you mentioned earlier and being able to collect quality data about international student acquisition now. How much has that accelerated over the past year or so, and is it changing the way that you work?
Well, yeah, it's something that we're definitely doing more and more and using more tracking, and that's been a lot easier with changing with Sinorbis, because we can see the analytics from China, because it's always hard when we used Google Analytics before. It was really hard to track traffic from China, especially also from our portals, because we knew a lot of students from China who visited portals were using a VPN connection. So it looked like they were coming from the US or the UK, but they were actually from China. And then it was kind of hard to figure out who was which was which. And then when we know from our Chinese website, we know that it's always Chinese traffic. So it's easier to figure out the way through the channels and how they engage with us.
And thank you. And Nicholas, in terms of the data that Sinorbis collects as part of its activity, have you been refining that process over the past year, or do you simply have more of it now because more people are using digital channels?
So do you mean more data from users or more data from students or prospective students?
Well, whichever is being utilized the most, I suppose, in terms of what's the most useful data that you've been gathering during this period?
Oh, okay. So there would be two different types. The first one, obviously, our platform does provide a suite of analytics where you can track almost everything. You can track everything in relation to your website. So similar to Google Analytics, you would see, the traffic, the conversion, which channel is driving, conversion on applications or demand of information. You can also track everything on WeChat, so who is doing what, your followers, the interactions that you've had with a specific profile. You can even, set up some QR codes, which is the way how people are, interacting in China. A lot of people are following new accounts by scanning QR codes. You can create as many QR codes as you want through our platform, and gives, one for different channels, which allows you to track offline channels as well in a good way. So that's one set of data. And obviously we as a company also provide a lot of insights to our clients. And to do so, we do a lot of research and analysis. We leverage the relationship that we have with the 4 major search engines in China, Baidu, Sogo, 360, and Shenma to actually have access to search data. And this allows us to give some insights on the trends, on what people are searching for, what are the type of questions that they're asking. And as we know, usually people are searching online probably 3 to 6 months before actually engaging with an institution. So it gives some insights, a little bit in advance on the different trends. That's one of the reasons why we are currently seeing a definitely uptick towards Europe from China. A lot of searches right now, a lot of demand. There has been a quite big shift from Australian demands to European demands from the search terms and what people are searching in China.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's to be expected given the current situation in Australia. We've had a question from the audience I'd like to put to you, Nicholas. Are there any particular countries or regions that are getting it right when it comes to breaking down the Great Firewall of China?
No. That would be the short answer. I mean, I think the main issue that we're having is we have been used to one internet for so long, the one led by the US, the one that everyone knows, which really led us to think that once you have a website, this website would be visible everywhere in the world. I mean, you just have to localize it, in German to Germany and French to France and so forth, but it will work. If you use Google, obviously it will work everywhere as well, and Facebook the same. So we forget that having something as simple as having a website that works, everywhere, including in China, is not a given. And to our experience, obviously in Asia, people are more aware of it. So they do work more towards that, but it doesn't mean that they do a better job. Now, I think people are starting to be more and more aware of it in Europe and in the US, and they know that it's different. And now I think they're just about to understand that even a website needs to be optimized and adapted to be visible in China, which was not a given before. But I wouldn't say that there's a specific country that is doing an amazing job right now with China. And that's the reason why we have Sinorbis.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, very nice point. To that point, do you think we'll have more international student journeys through China? Chinese students studying in multiple countries more than we are already. I'm just thinking in terms of how many universities are looking into diversifying their course offerings. So shorter courses, more international collaboration, more skill-specific learning, more lifelong learning for people who are already in work who need upskilling and reskilling. Does that all create another opportunity to engage with Chinese students in a different way?
Is it a question for
me?
Yeah. Yes, I absolutely. I think what is missing, but there are more and more institutions that are looking at the lifelong learning and making sure that actually they can have repeat, engagement with their previous students. This was not that popular before amongst Chinese students, and this we can see, and we're working with some institutions, mainly in the US as we speak, who are specifically targeting this audience. They are specifically targeting an audience, once they're going back to China, especially with the online capabilities now, also with the transnational education capabilities, where you have more and more presence on the ground that is helping to continue the engagement on an ongoing basis.
Great, thank you. And Git, I'd like to put a similar question to you. How developed is the lifelong learning proposition at Aarhus? Is it something that you're still figuring out, or is it something where you're starting to engage with more different types of learners already?
Well, most of our lifelong learning is actually only in Danish at the moment. And I think that's because traditionally Danish universities is not like the UK, something that is set to make money on recruitment. We are doing it we are also recruiting international students for other reasons, like diversifying and getting a better student body in general. So I think it's a different perspective in Denmark, but it's definitely something we're looking into, and we do a lot of summer courses as well. And with the pandemic, we've just moved like 5 years forward also with online courses and what people are used to. So there's definitely some opportunities, I think, to do a lot of online courses, both during your studies and your degree and later in life.
And presumably this will be something you've already talked about, having make the effort to establish good student networks for, Chinese students coming in, for example. Once you've spent longer talking to them, you will presumably have a better idea of what kind of international lifelong learning would be attractive to Chinese students coming to your institution.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we think we're looking into. But for now, I think we are focusing on expanding our student body of non-EU students for our master degrees, and then I think that would be probably the next natural step. But we're also focusing a lot on retaining our master degree students in Denmark, especially within certain programs within IT and engineering, where there's a shortage of graduates, and there's a lot of open job positions. So that's also our focus, to actually attract students that would be interested in getting a career in Denmark afterwards.
Okay, brilliant. We've had another question from the audience, which is asking, do you think that online teaching can be a new opportunity for internationalization of higher education beyond face-to-face learning? Gitte, would you like to tackle that one?
Well, sure. I think that definitely it gives a lot of opportunities, and also just with the fairs this fall, we could reach. Well, we normally go to fairs in Beijing and Shanghai. I was meeting students who was from staying in Inner Mongolia, and we would never have reached out to these students before. So you can go to a lot more remote places when it's online, and I guess that would be the same with teaching and classes. That you can go to so much more, many more places when you just have to sit in front of your computer. You just have to have a stable internet connection, and that gives you a lot of new possibilities. And I think that's definitely, we can see with our some universities this year that there's a lot more online courses, and the attraction of students is already a lot higher than we saw last year, when we suddenly had to move everything to online. Now it's more organized, but we can see that very talented students from a lot of our partner universities are very interested in this opportunity. So we can definitely see a shift there.
Brilliant, thank you. It's good to hear. Nicholas, to that point, do you have any advice for institutions who are trying to manage the increase in interest from China in terms of doing what Gitte described, which is being able to have conversations in more remote areas, being able to talk to different types of Chinese students?
Yes. Well, first, making sure that it works again, because it's not a given. So whatever you do, it might not be visible in China, or it might the latency might be terrible. So for video streaming, for instance, or video conferences, that can be definitely an issue. But also beyond the technical aspects, I would also recommend that it's important to adapt your content. I think the mistakes that we are seeing in general, and not just for China, but the shift to online came so quickly that a lot of institutions just replicated what they were doing, offline, online, and it's not the same. It's not the same medium. It's obviously not the same way to interact. And it's something that I think is very important to consider, because otherwise that can be a little bit tricky when you decide to engage online. The third one is also not to believe that everything can be replaced by online. And I'm from a digital background, and I'm still saying that. A big chunk of the interest for international education goes beyond just what you're learning. It's also the experience that you and the cultural exposure that you can have. And I think this is very important to understand. So I believe the future will be more a hybrid between online, but still, hopefully, when the borders will reopen, giving opportunities to experience that as well. But it will definitely change the way how students are studying, for sure, in the future.
So it's about not just using the new networks of student ambassadors and the social media channels that you have to talk about course content. It's also about to tell people about the sense of place, so they see the value in physically coming to your university.
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Well, that just about takes us up to time. So I'd like to thank both Nicholas and Gitte for their time today. I hope you found it as insightful as I did.